Hello and welcome back to another YouTube video. Today I'm doing my 25.13 ADC tier list. So if you enjoy content, like, subscribe, and let's get into it. There were in fact no direct balance changes towards the ADC role this patch. Why we're pretty happy with how it was going into MSI. There have been some pretty key talking points when it comes to MSI about what is being played and how the meta has kind of like progressed throughout the tournament so far. But let's get into it. So the D tier is going to consist of Kalista. Kalista is currently 08 at MSI. I don't know if you've been watching the games, but this champion has looked pretty bad. The whole, one of the key points of Kalista, or actually, there's primarily two key points of Kalista, is early shove and being able to secure early objectives with like the rend combined with the prior you're getting through this champion, and then the ability to facilitate supports such as Nico and Renata as being like really core parts of this champion's kit. Right now, though, she doesn't really get a prior into a huge amount. Like there are certain lanes which just don't give her that kind of like freedom. She definitely looks weaker as a champion. A lot of her early power has been siphoned out, and that is meaningful. Alongside that, we've also seen Nico begin to get paired with other things, and that has also kind of like hurt Kalista, because that was one of the key reasons you were playing Kalista before. She's still banned a lot, and people still are scared of her, especially when piloted by the best players in the game, like your Korean ADCs such as like Guma Yushi, for example. Guma Carry is obviously quite a common one when it comes to like the ranged support pairing combined with the Kalista. But right now, just talking about like average Edo solo queue, this champion just isn't good. Like the pick performs so poorly at the moment that I would just completely recommend avoiding it unless you are dueling with someone and incredibly comfortable on the pick. She is just a must avoid. This champion doesn't even perform that amazingly at the top of the ladder either, and it just shows. I really just can't recommend this as a champion at the moment. Moving on to the C tier then, is Brand. Brand sits towards the low end of the C tier at the moment, purely off the basis that I don't think this champion's great in his current state. He's also very, very much gated by the fact that his pairing in the bot lane is Nami. Like, you have to pair him alongside a Nami. It's really, really polarizing just how much his performance differs when paired with Nami and paired with, like, other support options. He could even be in the D tier. Like, honestly, like, when you are that kind of, you're that hampered by the fact that you can only be paired with one champion, basically forcing you to duo as a standalone champion, he's just not good when it comes to it. The other picks within the C tier are a bit more like conditional. Like your Dravens, for example, I don't think are great at the moment. Like if he was better, I think he'd be used more as like an answer to certain things. But right now, he's just a bit too weak for that. That being said, though, I still think Draven, if you are very, very good at piloting him, know how to close out game on this champion, which is one of the key things when it comes to playing Draven. You have to be good at closing out games, because if you can't close out games, this champion will get outscaled. He will struggle in like late game team fights where you are going to be just either like outscaled by those hyper carries or just struggle to get through front line. And for that, Draven's just not that recommendable for average solo queue. He also sits towards the low end of the C tier. Kai'Sa is the most popular champion at the moment. She is obviously a very, very flexible pick in terms of what she can provide, opting into like artillery, burst, having like hyper carry potential, pairing quite nicely alongside engage options, which is where like the biggest issue kind of it shines through in solo queue at the moment, is the fact that there is a lot of enchanters which are just played within solo queue. Like Nami, I believe, is #1 for popularity, but even things like Fresh aren't that amazing for Kai'Sa. She prefers things like your Nautiluses, things like your Alistars, and they are up there, they are popular to an extent, but there are a lot of enchanters amongst it, and that definitely does hurt her when it comes to like playing her with the things you want to be playing her with. All what to say though, she's also quite a hard champion. I don't think she's in one of her better states either though at the moment, which is why I don't really recommend her that highly. However, if you're comfortable on her, I do think she does supersede some of the options in the slightly higher tiers. So not a pick which is like locked to the C tier, like your Brands, and I think Draven's quite low down at the moment, but like towards the high end of the C tier. I think Ezreal is not that great at the moment. This pick has kind of shifted away from like he's been better in the past, and right now I just think he's in a bit of a lull state at the moment. If you're very comfortable on him, I still think you can like get good results on the champion, and he's quite safe, quite self-sustaining with his like mobility and his range. I just don't really recommend him if you just haven't put the time into him, and it's probably not the greatest time to be learning the champion. And then the final champion in the C tier is Corki. Corki doesn't perform out well for average brackets, even though he's a bit easier than some of the other options. He's very, very early game skewed, built around kind of his wave clear, and like macro becomes a lot more important when it comes to a pick like Corki, which is not that when it comes to like mid to low elo, it's just not going to be as consistent, like your macro decisions or how you want to play the map, and people will have different ideas, and that can lead you into some pretty bad spots. You won't really keep up with the tempo of the game, and this champion does get outscaled. That is one of the issues of Corki. He doesn't scale that well. He kind of like has to convert himself into either being like a poke champion or like a bruiser-esque kind of champion, or you're playing like a burst champion. You are playing to just dive in, hope that you one-shot someone, and then maybe trade 1-for-1. This pick doesn't have the same level of scaling potential as some of the other options have, purely because his like baseline kit is really good, and the fact that his range is quite low. Like, it forces him to kind of play into you later on into the game, which a lot of champions can kind of deal with at the moment. Moving on to the beta then, I am going to lead off with Ziggs, who's not that performant, hasn't been that performant for a while. There are spots where I think you can play him, and he's quite a good stonewall champion. Like, if you are just looking for a pick with good wave clear, which can kind of like push some ADCs off the wave, with his harass, I think he can kind of like be quite strong in those spots. Overall, I just don't think the pick's that amazing at the moment, and I would just recommend some of the other AP options over him. Maybe because they have a bit more like consistency, better tools, or are just slightly stronger in their current states. I just think Zig is not in one of his better spots, so I do have him towards the low end of the beta. Some of the other mages though, which are around here, are like your Luxes, which I think if you pair her with the right champions and you're like comboing quite nicely, I think this pick does have decent potential. Like, I quite like Lux. I think her waves are really good. Her burst potentials are really nice, and she's a solid flex option between 3 different roles. So there is definitely strengths to this champion. Veigar is down here. He's incredibly low elo skewed at the moment. His kit is very much built around getting as much XP as possible, just kind of push him out of the ADC role. That being said though, he still performs decently here, especially in those lower MMR brackets, which is why I recommend him as a B tier pick. I think if this was like I don't know, plat below, then I think you'd be even like an A, maybe even S tier pick, but because it kind of encapsulates gold to diamond as like for the bracket, I think Veigar definitely does struggle towards the higher end of those brackets, so gonna sit in the B tier at the moment. Mel is hampered by the fact that she is max strong. I think Riot are going to address this. It wouldn't surprise me if it is in the patch notes today when they come out. This champion is, just has a clear identity issue of what she wants to max. Like, Emax doesn't seem intuitive, but it's just by far and away the correct way to go about on this champion at the moment. Varus sits within the beta. He's also quite predicated on good macro. I think lethality Varus needs to kind of like, maybe not ramp up, but like put down some poke before fights kind of initiate, and when a lot of the time you'll just end up fighting instantly, like there will be no kind of like control to the fighting. It really hurts builds like that because you aren't gonna get the full value out of kind of what you're opting into, and on hit Varus isn't as good at the moment. The champion kind of struggles with the like board just not being that great of an item in its current state. I think Varus is still a very good champion and still very blindable, especially in like higher brackets of play. But for average solo queue, I just don't really recommend him as much as an option at the moment. I think he's definitely, especially with like the armor nerf more recently, can be a bit more vulnerable. And you need to kind of like, your team needs to play around you to an extent, and you're just not going to get that level of consistency when locking in this champion. Thelios, I think, is incredibly good if you're very comfortable on him. Like, that is one of the main things about the champion, but you just have to understand his weapon rotations. You understand like how much you can push with this champion. I think across the board he's in an incredibly good state. The main reason why he's like slightly lower down is because of his difficulty. He has quite a big difficulty curve, and that kind of prohibits a lot of like just picking up the champion and kind of expecting to get good results. You want to put time to him, but I think he's very rewarding to put time into, and I would recommend doing it at the moment. Xayah is an incredible self-peel ADC. I think into a lot of dives she can be really valuable. I wouldn't play her outside of those situations though. Like, you do just need to use her as a counter pick within your arsenal. I don't think she's good enough to blind and kind of get away with it. So sits within the beta at the moment, but does increase in value if you are getting her in the right spot. Caitlyn, I think, is decent. I think there are two things to Caitlyn at the moment which are like very clear when talking about her. Is How well do you use her laning phase? You need to understand that she is a 650 range ADC and you are exploiting that to the best of your capability, because if you don't, then you're kind of relying on her secondary win con, which is like scaling up to like 3-4 items and hoping that you just like one-shot people with your headshots, which can work. I think it is a decent fallback pattern if you are struggling, but you need to do both to be able to get the value out of a champion at the moment. I think if you don't do both and you end up struggling a bit in lane and when you're kind of weak in mid game, you can just let go of games. Like, games will fall through and you just won't get a consistent win rate or climb kind of pattern with this champion. In that case, I wouldn't recommend her. If you're comfortable like abusing her early, you understand that like you can utilize the range and the tools she has to like get control over like certain states of the game, then I think she's a very powerful ADC still. But that's quite hard. Like, Caitlyn is a hard ADC to play, and for that reason, the other reason like the headshot one shots isn't particularly hard. It's just about scaling up and making sure you're in the right spot and targeting the right target. But you've got two different patterns there. I think Caitlyn can be really good though if you are able to do both quite successfully. If you struggle with one, then I'd probably recommend other things over her at the moment. Seraphine is fine. I think she's a good B tier champion. I have her towards the high end of the B tier. I think in the right spots she can be really powerful. She's probably not one of my premier AP options to recommend though at the moment, but she's a good jack of all trades champion, and I think she can get a lot of value if you are very comfortable playing her and understanding her combos and like what she provides to a team composition. I am going to drop Samira down. I maybe overshot with Samira slightly. I still think she's a good B tier option. She's just a bit too reliant on good pairings and like having a good engage support. If you don't have that, then this champion really suffers. Like, this pick needs those to kind of enable her to kind of like be strong within the game. And if you're paired alongside an enchanter, you kind of struggle. Like, you are more reliant on like just a late game pop-off scenario, which is not as consistent of a win condition. Like, you are just not going to get given those consistently, which is why I think she does struggle a bit more than maybe some of the other A tier options. Moving on to the A tier, then we lead off with Lucian, who's been doing pretty well for himself for a while now. I think this champion, if you're very comfortable on him, can be really good. If you're not, and you don't have good pairings, then he's towards the low end of the A tier. But if you're able to really like comfortably like put like use the strengths of the champion, how good it is mid game, how nicely it pairs with certain pairings, then I think he can be a very strong marksman in the current meta. Ashe, I think, is a good utility option. I don't think she's in her best state, but she had been buffed relatively recently to kind of enable her to, I think it was scale a bit better on the queue, which is a nice kind of buff for her to get because she was doing a bit like a bit worse before those changes. Twitch, Vayne are like solo queue like options. This is just the bracket of play where these two picks really do perform like mid elo. Being able to like stable advantages and use their kind of the 1v9 potential to kind of like take over games. I think they are very skill expressive marksmen, like where you open on Twitch and where you're able to kind of like pilot fights on Vayne. I think both these champions can be really dominant in this, like in this bracket where like your gold to diamond climb. You should put a lot of time into these champions, so I don't think they're easy. I think their game plans are very different to a traditional marksman, which is why I think they sit towards the lower end of the A tier. But these picks, if you're very comfortable with them, can be really good options to climb with if you're just willing to sink a lot of time into them. Some of your other AP options are the likes of Swain and Hui. I think Hui is my number one just generic mage option in the bot lane. I really like him as a pick. He's a lot of flexibility in what he can provide, great wave clear, and just great overall like damage tools. I just think this champion provides a lot of everything, and which can be really nice. Swain is a great counter pick option into low damage, short range compositions. This pick really does shine. I think he's maybe not underrated. He's probably underplayed slightly, but he's just not that popular of a pick, so that's to be expected. Just pick him in the right spots if you're comfortable on him. I think he'd be quite a good option. If you're not comfortable playing Swain, he's not mandatory at the moment. I just think he can have spots where he can really shine as a champion. Some of your other marksman options include the likes of Cogmore, who I think is a bit misunderstood at the moment and can still go the AP variation. I think people like really quickly jumped off of that, but I think in the right spots it can definitely still shine as like an option. That being said though, I think Ginsu's on Cogmore is an incredibly powerful item. Cogmore has a lot of strength early, and I recommend trying to exploit that if you are playing the champion. I think it kind of gives him more than maybe what a lot of people expect him to be, but in this like late game hyper carry fantasy, which he can be with like the right pairings. But his early game strength is present. Like, people should really try and push for as much with this champion when like you've got like when your W's active and when you have like a Ginsu's. He does a stupid amount of damage. Like, you can just outright 1v1 most ADCs within the game. Smolder sits within the A tier. This champion received a buff and then received like a slight tap down. He's still performing really well though. He has flexibility in builds. Like, you can go some like more bruiser-esque builds. You can go some more crit orientated builds. I think this champion just in his general state feels a bit more inevitable in it, which is like kind of what I want to go with this champion, because once you get to those like stat points, then yeah, he does a huge amount of damage and it can be a very, very scary champion to face. Jhin and Senna wrap up the remaining A tier picks. In the case of Jhin, I believe this champion is still a great utility marksman. Can do great damage if you give him gold. If not, then he does just end up being kind of like a fullback. Like, you have the traps which you can like throw out in mid lane. You're just playing on that mid wave, collecting waves where you can, and kind of playing around your team. But if you are given gold, then yeah, you can like carry games at the moment. He definitely got given a lot more power with buffs he received towards the beginning, or it was like I think it was towards the beginning of this year, and he's kind of been doing decently since then. Senna obviously got a huge buff. They pulled back some of it, and now she sits as like a solid A2 option. I don't think she's a great carry option. I think she needs a bit of time to kind of get going. Like, you want your 3-4 items with like your RFCs and your IEs coming through, and that's where this champion really shines as an option. Before then, she can feel a bit more mediocre, but she does still do a decent amount. Like, I think this pick definitely has good potential, especially with like just like a static shiv, and cleaver core. I think those items are really nice on her. Gives her like good utility as well, which is what this champion wants to provide in a lot of situations. And then you're just sat on mid wave, you're collecting your souls, you're scaling up, which is yeah, just a pretty standard play pattern. It's quite nice. Not quite as much agency as some of the other ADC picks, but if you're not looking for agency, then Senna can be a good option there for you. And moving up to the S tier is Sivir. Sivir's been performing quite well for a while now, especially within average Elo brackets. I think the champion is just a good option to go to if you are looking for something which can just kind of scale up, freely wave clear, yeah, those are just like the main kind of aspects of the champion, because she has like really easy wave access with the W, the Q, gives her really quick tools to clear that and then move to an objective, move to a fight, like trade with the opponent. I think she's just in a pretty decent state in her current spot. Zeri, I'm kind of tempted to drop her down to the high end of the A tier. She's a bit more reliant on certain pairings, and she is unique in the way she plays. That being said, though, I think her burst at level 6 is insane. Her hyper carry potential is really, really nice. You do want to get like your 1, 2, 3 items kind of going through to kind of spike as this champion. But once you're there, yeah, this pick's incredibly strong. Definitely got a lot of potential. I leave her at the low end of the S tier because I think she's a bit harder, or a bit more a bit different to some of the other options here. But I say that like Nida and Yasuo don't exist as other options here. Nida, I think, is just blatantly overpowered. I think the champion's incredibly strong in her current state. Loads of picks are really nullified with her W, and her burst potential combined with her just like damage output are really, really high. Like, she's just really, really strong in her current state, but really unpopular, and that's probably to her strength because people just don't understand how to play against her. Yasuo, I think, is maybe not sleeper overpowered, but this champion has been in a very strong state and across all 3 of his roles recently, and the pairings he can kind of work with, some of those like knockup pairings, really, really nice. He's a bit more conditional with his pairings. Like, I think these 3 probably sit towards the lower end because they're maybe slightly more conditional than the other 4 in the S tier, but they're all really, really good in the right spots, and I recommend having at least one of them in your arsenal, because having that like unique pick can be the difference maker sometimes. Tristana, still within the S tier, still a great champion for like all the tools she provides, her range, her wave clear, her just raw hyper carry DPS output. All really nice. She pairs nicely with like most champions within the game. You can pair her with an enchanter and she can be a hyper carry. You pair her with an engage and she can just be a dive kind of early game burst champion. Like, there are loads of different ways of playing this pick, and I think she's in a great state for that at the moment. MF, I think, can pair with a lot of things. Don't really want to pair with enchanters though. You primarily just want to pair with engage, get those like knockups going, get those like large CC crowd control moments, and then her ult can kind of rip apart teams. She's generically just very strong in her current state, being able to opt into both the BT and the Yomu's variant. Maybe not quite as good as Tristana. I think I'll have her like a slightly lower than, actually I'll put her slightly lower than Tristana and Sivir, because I don't think she's quite as agnostic with like the pairing she can kind of work with, but I still think she's a great S tier option and very easy to play. And then Jinx, still my premier pick. I think this champion has so much carry potential, pairs really nicely with most of the kind of like roster at the moment. Has like hyper carry capability, isn't too weak early on into the game either. Like if you abuse her range and kind of her snowboarding factor, I think this champion can definitely take over games. Has good objective control. Doesn't see a lot of competitive play though at the moment, so it's like hard to kind of like watch like games on her, but there are lots of people who play Jinx, and I believe Guma usually has played a game of Jinx if you kind of like want to glimpse over that and kind of look how that kind of played out. But I do think the champ's very strong in her current state, a great solo queue option to lean to. And those are probably my like 3 main recommendations. I think like a pool of Jinx, Tristana, Sivir, really nice at the moment. MF also really good. And then like having a unique option like a Nyla, a Yasuo, or a Zeri, or like a utility pick like your Jins and your Ashes can be really good. The lower down you go, the more I recommend playing them if you're like an OTP. If you're not an OTP, then they become like just less valuable than some of the generic S tier options. But things like Sivir, things like Xayah are a great counter pick option. And some of the rest of the arsenal are a bit more dependent, like certain support pairings to kind of come out and really shine. Those are my thoughts. Thank you guys for watching. See you in the next one. Goodbye.